Welcome to American Gypsy Podcast. I am your host, Gypsy, and today I have a special guest, Alan Lazaros. He is the CEO of Next Level University, a podcast host and business coach. Welcome to the show, Alan.
Mhm. As I sip my water to try to get
I
my
know,
voice
right?
to be good, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. You mentioned all the different things that you talk about, and you said basically it's self improvement. So I'm grateful to be here. I am obsessed with self improvement. It's my favorite thing in the entire world. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, I got to read up on you. You have an interesting story. I love hearing about people overcoming obstacles to build the life that they want. But it seems like you've been kind of through the roller coaster of trying to perfect that and have analyzed some things. So it's good to get your perspective on it. Can you talk a little bit about like your background and your journey of how you got here?
Yeah, so I'll try to give you the short version, but I'm trying to condense
Sure.
35 years into 5 minutes here. I often joke, I say I'm hoping to hit puberty at 36. I look very, very young. I'm turning 36 in November, but before I tell this story, the important thing to understand is, to your point, I didn't really understand any of this at the time. I have since done some therapy in my 30s and I've reflected on my life and I've sort of rewatched the movie of my own life. And in hindsight, it's become more clear. It's like when you watch a movie as a kid and then you see it as an adult and now you sort of get it. It's, oh, okay, got it. So, started out with adversity. When I was 2 years old, my father passed away in a car accident when he was 28. Mother was 31, sister was 6. My real last name is actually McCorkle.
Mm.
I took my stepfather's last name around 7. So from age 3 to 14, I had a stepfather named Steve, and his last name was Lazarus. And when we were the Lazaruses, trying to be the Lazaruses, we didn't really associate much with the McCorkles anymore.
Mm.
And then my stepfather left when I was 14. He took 90% of the income with him. And he got the house in the, or no, I'm sorry, he got the yacht in the apartment building. We got the house and the dog. And before 14, I kind of playfully refer to that part of my life as boats and BS.
Mm.
Hunting, fishing, ski trips. We had a yacht, deep sea fishing, boats, uh, snowmobiles. My stepdad had a Ducati motorcycle. We did well, and it was also the late '90s, sort of .com bubble. He worked for a company called Agfa that did hospital computers, so we did very well. But when he left, he took 90% of the income with him. So I went from sort of Xbox, Dreamcast, early Christmas presents to super excited to go to college to basically I don't even know how I'm going to go to college. And so I went from all of that to basically I get free lunch at school because our income is so low. We aren't going to starve, but my mom trades in her BMW for a little Honda Civic, and life was definitely very different after that. That same year, so 14 was the hardest year of my life. I didn't realize this at the time, but stepdad leaves, takes his entire extended family with him. Haven't seen a single one of them since. Birth father passed away when I was 2. My mom gets in a fight when I'm 14 with my aunt Sandy, her sister, and then my aunt Sandy sort of ostracizes us from her side of the family. So, and then in that same year, my sister moved out with her older boyfriend. So when I was 14, by the time I'm 14 years old, I kind of sort of lost 3 families. And again, I did not know that at the time. I only realized this in reflection, right? So fortunately, my trauma response to all of that was aim higher, work harder, get smarter. I became this like super driven, gritty super achiever. And I also became kind of a social coward. There's 4 trauma responses. There's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Fawn is the appeaser. And then behind the scenes, it was fight. It was I look at the past, I look at the present, and there's a lot of pain and adversity and challenge. And I look into the future and I go, okay, so there's no trust fund. I don't have a dad. If I don't do something about this, we're in trouble. And so I got straight A's through all of high school. I got what's called the President's Award. It's actually behind me. And basically, that means you get a 95 or above GPA. all 4 years of high school, 16 report cards straight. And so I was able to go to my dream school. My goal since I was 10 years old was to go to Worcester Polytechnic Institute. It's kind of like a mini MIT. It's an engineering school. And it was $50,000 a year back in 2007 when I graduated high school. So it was really expensive. And so I didn't know how I was going to go. So I had to get as much financial aid and scholarships as I possibly could. I did. I got in. I went for computer engineering, and then I got my master's in business. And after that, it was, I spent all of high school and college as kind of broke. And so when I got my master's in business and I had my computer engineering degree, after that, I did very well. And this is sort of my corporate career, as short lived as it was. I went from 65 to 85, 85 to 105, 105 to 125, 125 to almost 200 grand a year. And I worked for all different companies. I worked for a company called iRobot. I worked for Sensata Technologies, which used to be Texas Instruments. I worked for Tyco Safety Products. I worked for a company called Lens Americas, another one called Oz Development. I eventually landed at a company called Cognex. Cognex sells industrial automation equipment into manufacturing facilities all across the world. They do machine vision, so it's kind of like the eyes of a robot. I do inside sales engineering there, start a little inside sales team, and then I get promoted to outside sales, and I do a territory. My territory was Vermont, Connecticut, and Western Massachusetts. So I'm traveling all over those 3 states, and I'm selling machine vision equipment. And at this point, I'm in my early 20s. I have a girlfriend named Courtney. We live on a lake and we split rent. It's like $500. I don't have kids. I don't have a mortgage. My expenses are low because I'm used to being broke. And I'm making almost $200,000 a year. So I pay off $84,000 worth of debt in a single year. I invest all my money. Because again, when my stepdad left, I think unconsciously it was, okay, wealth is the answer. So I end up with $150,000 in Vanguard investment account. Just invest, get wealthy. Then I get in my car accident. So I'm 26 years old at this point. I'm up in New Hampshire with my little cousin, actually the only cousin that ever came back from my mom's side of the family. And we were driving to TGI Fridays, and I end up on the wrong side of the road. I was supposed to yield. I didn't. The snowbanks were covering the yield sign. And I cross the double yellows. I look up from the GPS and I see what the brightest lights I'd ever seen. What I thought was a Mack truck. 2 things saved my life. Number one, I was driving a 2004 Volkswagen Passat. I used to call this car the tank because it was just this heavy steel trap of a car. Thank you, Volkswagen. And both airbags deployed. That car definitely saved my life. Number 2 thing that saved my life is it wasn't a Mack truck. It was a lift-kitted pickup truck. And so the whole front end smashed in, both airbags deployed. He hurt his knee on the airbag. I hurt my face on the airbag. So physically, we were okay. And this was not a fender bender. I've seen pictures of my dad's car and I've seen pictures of my car, and they don't look very different. And so this is the second chance my dad never got. And so physically, we're okay, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, I am completely existential quarter life crisis, Phoenix burned down, rise anew from the ashes type of thing. And so it's referred to as an ego death. Everything I thought I knew about myself, others, and the world, I had to question everything. And that's ultimately what brought me here. So that was 9 years ago, which is wild to say. About to be 10 years ago because I'm about to be 36 in November. And then, so in hindsight, this is what's obvious to me now. I have these sort of 4 buckets that I use. When I was a kid, I was unsuccessful and unfulfilled. And I think that's where we all start. I was a cart kid and a busboy. I worked for a golf course. I wasn't successful. I made $7.25 an hour, minimum wage, and I was definitely unfulfilled. Then I became successful, high school, college, bachelor's degree, master's degree. I became really successful, but I wasn't fulfilled. Pre-car accident, I was very successful and not very fulfilled. Post-car accident, I flipped the script. I went all the way past broke, started my own company. I'm super fulfilled, happy, healthy, productive, deeply fulfilled, love myself, love my life, work on myself, but I'm unsuccessful. And now I'm finally in bucket 4. So that's bucket 1, 2, 3, and then 4, which is both successful and fulfilled. And so if you can authentically say, I want my future to be a amplified version of my current life, then that means you probably are both successful and fulfilled, and you just want more of that.
Mm.
And so I think a lot of us on the human journey are really trying to figure out how to get to that fourth bucket. And it took me 35 years, more like 33 years, to kind of get into that fourth bucket of both successful and fulfilled. And I actually think, and this will be the last piece of it, before 26, I was very achievement oriented. I was very improvement oriented. I was very professionally developed: resume, cover letter, LinkedIn, bachelor's degree, master's degree, da, 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 all that. But I wasn't self improvement oriented. I wasn't doing therapy. I wasn't doing the inner work. I wasn't focused on personal development, personal growth, self improvement. And so I flipped the script and I went all in on self improvement, went broke, and then I wasn't successful. And so I think that success, I think, is actually fairly easy. I think fulfillment is fairly easy. I think doing them both simultaneously is unbelievably difficult. And I think that's ultimately what all of us need to learn how to do: is how do we do self improvement in tandem with professional development? How do we do personal development and professional development? How do we become ambidextrous? Because you have a lot of people that are very externally successful, but they're not fulfilled inside. And then you have some people who are fulfilled and they love themselves and they love their life, but they're not very successful. And so it's very hard to do both. And that's hopefully what we can help people with today.
Yeah, and I like how you mentioned successful but unfulfilled, because I think at that point we're really measuring success based on, I guess, monetary values and material things or your outer world. And I feel like to be truly successful, like you said, you have to fill those two buckets of inner and outer world. What about the accident, like, gave you an ego death? What about it made you, like, do this whole, self-analysis of your whole life?
Regret. So I actually think the two best teachers in the world are regret and fulfillment.
Mm.
And I didn't know this at the time. But I just looked at my life from this sort of existential analytical place of all my regrets. What do I regret? If that had been the end, what would I regret? I think that a lot of people have this weird relationship with regret where they say, well, that's what got you here, so don't regret it. Well, if that's the case, then why change anything? Right? Everyone think of something in high school that you did that was really idiotic. Everyone in high school does dumb stuff. Okay, so everyone, I usually do this with audiences. I say, can everyone think of something they did in high school that they would never do again? And everyone goes, oh, yeah. Yep. There you go. You've got a smile on your face. So you're thinking of at least one. Okay. So why would you not do that again? The answer is you are now more aware of the long term consequences or potential consequences of that dumb choice. So the truth is, whether we want to admit it to ourselves or not, is that we all make terrible choices. And I don't think statistically I made any worse choices than most, but I'll tell you what, the only way to amplify the probability that you have a happier, healthier, better, brighter, bigger future is to start making better choices. And the best way to start making better choices is to learn from your own experiences of what was outside of alignment. That's all regret is. Regret is, wow, I did that stupid thing that was so totally outside of alignment with my goals, or outside of alignment with my core values, or outside of alignment with my integrity. So regret is the best teacher. If you look at your regrets and feel them, you will change. I often playfully joke and I say it took me 5 years to quit drinking. And I wrote an article once about how I traded the label of alcoholic in for bodybuilder. And you know what's fascinating is I started referring to myself as an alcoholic in my mid 20s. And I was less of an alcoholic than most of the people that were around me. The difference is I admitted it. The admittance factor is the first step. You have to own it first. You have to take personal responsibility first. Like, oh, shoot, I think I might have a problem. And then you have to feel the pain of that problem. And then you have to use that pain and transform it into positive change. The problem is, if you don't believe in yourself, you won't do that. So that's where everyone has to start, in my honest opinion. You have to start with self-belief. Self-worth matters too, but self-belief has to be where you start. Because if you don't have self-belief, you won't look in those mirrors, because a mirror is just painful unless you believe in your ability to change it.
Can you talk about what it looks like to have belief in yourself, but have low self-esteem? Because I feel like most people think those are the same thing. So can you explain
Yeah,
what that means?
absolutely. So I thought they were the same thing too. I remember I was talking to my girlfriend, Emilia, and I was driving home from the studio at the time. That was when we had a in-person studio pre-COVID. Actually, I think it was right after COVID. But anyways, I'll never forget when she said, self-belief and self-worth are two different things, right? And I was like, no. She's like, they're two different things. What a breakthrough. All right. So self-belief, and I didn't realize, self-belief is I believe in my own ability to achieve X, Y, or Z externally. I can build the castle. Give me enough time and enough effort. I can do it. I know I can do it. Right. That's self-belief. Self-worth is I deserve to live in the castle, and I'm going to protect it. I'm going to honor it. I'm going to clean it. And I'm not going to let people come in and spill beer all over the carpets. So self-worth is your own internal value, how much you value yourself. Self-belief is your ability to achieve something externally. And that's why there's two types of courage. One is competence courage, apply to the job, apply to the speech, do the thing, write the resume. And then there's social courage. And this is the one that I did not have. Social courage is stick up for yourself. Say what you really think, even though it's uncomfortable. Be okay with being better than. So I'll give you one tiny example. This is really scary to share. I'm really smart. To anyone listening, that's obvious. But me saying it, no, 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 no. You're not allowed to say that you're smart. That's really scary. Now, for someone who isn't smart, it's actually scary to say you're not smart. I can say I'm not smart all day. I'm not smart. No, I'm not that smart. It doesn't bother me because I know it's not true.
Mm.
What's scary is saying I am, because that's when people start to attack and hate you. Oh, what an arrogant, and then you get villainized. So there's competence courage, which I always had a lot of. That's self-belief. Social courage, that's a whole nother ballgame.
Mm.
That's self-worth. And most people think they're the same, to your point.
Yeah.
Everyone pictures someone right now who appears to believe in themselves at level 10, almost abrasively, almost like too much. Why would someone with level 10 self-belief have level 2 goals? It's not real. It's inflated fake self-worth. And so people who have real self-belief, they come across people like that. And then those people attack, because it's easier to attack me than it is to admit that you actually don't believe in yourself. And so that's been a hell of a journey over the last many, many, many years.
Yeah, that makes sense because I feel like I believe in myself, but I struggle with yeah, that social courage. Maybe I feel like if I could see how I could play small in a way to kind of blend in or not be so, you know, like egotistical, like or show offy or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, so you stay small on purpose to protect yourself from social pain.
Yeah.
And all of us are either afraid, this is a great quote. You're afraid that all of you is not enough, or you're afraid that all of you is too much. So we all stay in this little comfort zone in between failure and success. You don't want to be you don't want to be losing so much that you're seen as a failure, but you don't want to be so successful that you get ostracized and villainized by your peers.
Right.
So we all stay in this little comfort zone. And the people who really believe in themselves, they don't even want to share their goals. If you are out there listening right now and you are scared to share your goals with others, You believe in yourself a lot. If you pretend to have goals and really behind the scenes you don't have any, you don't believe in yourself that much. You might think you do. And you probably don't like me.
Interesting. So what do you feel like in these instances someone can do to manage that, to not play small or self-sabotage in certain instances? Or what can people do to get out of this mindset?
So ultimately, I think everything comes down to, and so I've been coaching for 7 years. I've coached at this point dozens, if not hundreds of people. I have 28 people I'm currently coaching right now. And ultimately, it always comes down to self-belief and self-worth. That's the core. Some people have low self-belief and inflated self-worth. Some people have low self-worth and super high self-belief. Very few people have both, and very few people have both accurately. And then some people have neither, and that is dark. That's like feeling really helpless. And so anyone who's there, we gotta build them, and you can build them. That's the cool part. You can build them. You totally can. First, you got to identify which one you have and which one you don't, and that's really hard to do because a lot of people think they have self-belief and they don't. And then I know some people who think they don't have self-belief and they actually believe in themselves a bunch, which is fascinating. So first you got to identify which one is in the real world. I'm not talking when you're with people. Remember, everyone, when you're in a social setting, people who don't believe in themselves in a social setting pretend they do. In a social setting, people who do believe in themselves pretend they don't, typically. Okay? So I'm talking who are you when you're by yourself? How do you feel about yourself when you're by yourself? Those are the questions that matter. So when you're by yourself, be honest with yourself. No one else is going to know. 0 to 10, how much do you believe in yourself? Not intellectually. I'm talking subconsciously and unconsciously. Okay. If you said 2 or 3, you struggle with self-belief and you got to work on building it. And I'll teach you how. It's a formula. I'm an engineering guy, so I need formulas for everything. It's state, prove, self-assign. My business partner, Kev, struggled with self-belief. He was an all-star baseball player in high school, and we went to the same high school. But he thought he got lucky. He's like, dude, I thought I got lucky. What do you mean? I said, can you imagine how good you would have been if you decided to get good? I'm like, let me get this straight. You were an all-star baseball player and you just stumbled upon it? Can you imagine? I said, brother, I've never stumbled upon anything. I decided to get straight A's and then I went and did it. So I stated I'm going to get straight A's in high school. And then I proved to myself I could do it. And then I self-assigned it once I did it. That's how you build self-belief. And all of this is happening unconsciously. So a lot of people live their lives stumbling upon success or failure and then self-assigning whatever that is. They didn't state and prove. And so if that resonates with you, you haven't been building unconscious belief and you can start the process. So state, prove, self-assign. What you have to do is say, I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow for 30 minutes. State. Go to the gym for 30 minutes tomorrow. Prove that you can do it. Then when you do, hell yeah, I did that. Self-assign it. Then you try 35 minutes, then 40 minutes, then 45 minutes, then 50 minutes, right? And then you build self-belief. You build self-efficacy. You can do that. The problem is if you keep pretending you believe in yourself at level 8, you're going to start setting level 8 goals and then never following through. Belief is built in the process, not results. If I don't get a client tomorrow, I'm not going to believe in myself less. But I will if I keep missing sales calls. Right? So you got to set process goals for people who struggle with belief. You can't base it on results because the results sometimes don't come. They're external. Right? I can't guarantee I'm going to get a client tomorrow, but I can guarantee you I'm showing up for that call tomorrow. right? And if you got to play a winnable game, got to play a winnable game, and you got to self-assign it once you follow through. Okay, that's number one. So if you don't struggle with self-belief and you did say 0 to 10 and you said 10, okay, you have a different issue. Your issue is you already follow through on the process all the time. You already get results eventually, and you basically feel unlikable. You don't feel relatable. You get unjustly treated for what seems like no reason, and you probably struggle with social courage. You're most likely quite cowardly around other people. I used to call myself a chameleon, aka be whatever anyone needs me to be in order to stay safe and liked. So my fear was being disliked, so I just did whatever I had to do to get liked. But that's a quick way to be deeply unfulfilled. So what you need is not self-belief. You already have that. What you need is self-worth. Self-worth can also be built. There's a formula. And we have a pyramid of self-worth that we teach at Next Level University. But ultimately, and the cool thing about a pyramid is the only way you climb higher is if it gets wider. So you got to start with the foundation. So I'll just go through them. I got to close my eyes when I do this. So the bottom is promises. Keep the small promises you make to yourself. If you had a friend who broke as many promises to you as you've broken to yourself, how much would you value that friendship? Right?
Yeah.
Number 2 is boundaries. You have to set and honor clear boundaries, particularly with people you're scared to. When you're scared to set the boundary, it's proof the other person's benefiting from you not having one. If you set a boundary with me right now and said, hey, I got to go in 10 minutes, I'm not going to lash out at you. Okay, no worries. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Gratitude, gratitude. Right? The people who lash out when you set boundaries are the people benefiting from you not having them. Biggest issue I've ever uncovered in myself. I was so bad at boundaries, so bad. And when I got better at them, everything started to change. Number 3, courage, social courage. You're taking self-respect hits every time you don't say your truth. I have one instance one time where I'll never forget it. There's a guy. He said, well, the only way to make money these days is real estate. And in my head, I'm like, okay, that's got to be one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. Have you heard of tech? Have you heard of the biggest companies in the world? Have you heard of the internet? Like, maybe that was true in the past. That's definitely not true now. But what did I do? I want to be liked, so I don't say anything. I just let him think that the only way to make money nowadays is real estate. Like, that's the dumbest thing ever. I just didn't have the courage to call it out. You're wrong.
Though.
What'd you say? It seems harmless.
Seems harmless. Like, okay, just kind of.
Yeah, exactly. Just brush it off, which is obviously what you do, by the way. That's why you're resonating with this, because it's not worth it, right? Quote unquote. It's not worth it. There's self-worth. It's not worth it. So you take a self-worth hit every time you don't speak up. And the reason you don't speak up is because usually the people that are super opinionated and super insecure, pretending not to be, lash out when you do. That's why the people who read the least have the strongest opinions. It's so wild. The people who are the most ignorant usually have the strongest opinions. We all deal with this. People say things. It's like, oh, I was a fitness model in my 20s, late 20s. Fitness model, fitness competitor, fitness coach. My whole world was fitness. And I literally had won competitions. And I remember I had a person just saying all this stuff about fitness. I remember thinking, like, you're not even in shape. Why are you teaching me about fitness? Oh, you're just an energetic dominant who has to always be holding the energetic high ground because I'm so docile and so scared of you lashing out. So self-worth, self-respect comes from courage, social courage. I should have called him out. I should have said, that's not true. That doesn't mean I have to be a dick. Doesn't mean I have to say that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, even though that's what my brain said. What I could say is that's not true. The tech space is where most of the future is. And then it would have been this a little bit, but then I would have left with some self-respect, some self-worth, some self-esteem. Okay. 2 more. So far we have keep the small promises you make to yourself, set and honor clear boundaries, social courage, stand up for yourself, stand up for what you believe in, stick up to the bully, stand up to the people trying to put you down. The 4th one is invest in yourself. In yourself. Why would someone renovate a house they didn't believe was of value? Why would you redo the basement and redo the kitchen and redo the deck if you didn't believe the house was valuable? So you got to invest in the therapist, invest in the coach, invest in the books, invest in the courses, invest in yourself, invest in the asset. You are the asset. You can tell when people don't invest in themselves. They don't think they're worth it. I'm worth it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't think you're worth it, you're not going to put the money in to invest in yourself. So that's number 4. Number 5, and this one's something that I don't really struggle with a ton, but I know a lot of people do. Apples to apples comparisons. It's not really fair for you to compare apples and oranges. So I'm 7 years into podcasting. We have 1,800 episodes. You should not compare to me. You should compare to whoever's at your stage in the journey. It's not a fair comparison, right?
Yeah.
And so apples to apples comparison is a really important part of having accurate self-worth. If you only compare to people less than you, you big fish, small pond, you end up inflated self-worth. If you only compare to people ahead of you, which is probably what you do, by the way, you most likely have lower self-worth. And by the way, people with high self-belief always compare above, not below.
Mm.
And why? It keeps you small.
Yeah.
Keeps you small. So for me, I always compared to the best on the planet. And I realized later on that affects my self-worth. Go ahead.
Do you feel like that's an issue? Like, I could see how that can affect your self-esteem. Like, I'm always, looking up to compare myself to, like, giants.
Oprah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, I could see how that can affect me. Like, okay, I'm not doing as good. And you're critiquing yourself in the wrong way.
You're
Um,
also
but like,
comparing her external in that moment success
mm,
with your real struggles,
mm,
right? It's like comparing the highlight reel to your real life.
right.
So it's an apples and oranges comparison, even though so not only is it unfair because and again, I'm just using Oprah as an example. I don't know if you actually compare to Oprah, but
Mm,
she's 30 years ahead of you in her career,
mm,
right? And on top of that, you're seeing the external success. You're not seeing her inner struggles,
right.
although she does share those pretty well. So the apples to apples comparisons are super important for self-worth. But people who believe in themselves a lot like to compare to people way ahead because it ignites them.
Mm-hmm.
People with low self-belief don't like to compare to people ahead. They like to compare to people behind because it inflates their self-worth. So you just have to be aware of the
Yeah.
dynamic.
So how do you build on courage if you're struggling, like you said before, in these social courage? How do you combat that? What are some steps you can take?
Fear chasing. Okay, so you had mentioned earlier that you're a software developer and you put yourself out there. That took a lot of social courage.
Mm-hmm.
One baby step that I think is a good example is everyone's afraid to post their podcast on Facebook, their personal Facebook.
Right.
If you posted this episode on your personal Facebook, how much would that scare you?
Not at all. I actually do that.
No?
Well, I didn't used to in the past. I kind of separated those two lives, but now I'm kind of just out there. I'm on
Okay, nice. But in
facing.
the beginning, that would have been a big deal, right?
I mean, that's why I created the nickname for the podcast. It's kind of
Exactly. Yep.
the other life can't find me.
Exactly. That's the social courage.
Mm,
That's the social courage. So the first thing to become more courageous is understand which one you struggle with most. Is it competence courage? I'm too afraid to start the podcast. I'm afraid I'm going to suck. Or is it social courage? I have no problem starting it. I'm doing it. Let's rock and roll. But I'm afraid to post about it with my friends and family.
Mm.
One of them is social courage. The other one is competence courage. So I was never afraid to do a podcast. I was always afraid to post it so that my friends and family see it.
Right.
And so you have to identify what's the fear. The fear for someone without social courage is you're going to be disliked, you're going to be villainized, you're going to be attacked. The fear for someone with competence courage is you're not going to be good enough, you're not going to be smart enough, you're not going to be capable enough. And so you just have to identify which one you have. For those of you who have the I'm not going to be smart enough, good enough, or capable enough, you have to build competence courage by constantly putting yourself out there, baby step, baby step, baby step, baby step, baby step, and building that belief. For the social courage piece, you need to have the self-worth and the self-respect to actually put yourself out there and risk being villainized. As a matter of fact, I got scared even thinking about you posting it on your personal Facebook. Because some of the stuff I'm sharing right now, I mean, how hard is that? I
Yeah.
mean, the people I grew up with, they have every opportunity in the world to villainize me.
Yeah.
And I'm sick of it, to be honest.
Yeah. I've gotten to the point where I don't care anymore. It's like once you feel like you've stepped past that point, it's like, okay, well, I'm out here now, so I might as well do it. So it kind of takes away the fear a little bit more. And the more I do it, it just kind of diminishes that fear.
Yeah, that's called exposure therapy. You just keep exposing, keep exposing, keep exposing little by little, and eventually the fear shrinks as you keep facing it. Fear gets bigger when you don't face it.
Mm. Can we talk a little bit about fear of success? Because I think a lot of people talk about fear of failure, and don't know what and feel like fear of success. Why would you be scared of success? So can you talk about that a little bit?
So this is all based on whatever your core exile or core wound or core limiting belief is. And again, everything has those two dualities. So if you are on the low self belief end, your deepest fear is most likely being seen as a failure. You'll do anything to not be seen as a failure. Okay. If you're on my end of fear of success and the self worth struggles, the reason you're afraid of success is because you're afraid to be attacked, villainized. Um, the two core wounds. There's a modality of therapy called internal family systems, and I have a therapist. Her name's Carol, who's teaching me this. The main core exile, one of the main core exiles. It's basically just the part of you that holds your pain, is known as defective, and that's someone who feels not capable enough at their core.
Mm.
That's not mine. The other one is unlovable, meaning you feel super capable, you just don't feel lovable. You feel like you've always been conditionally loved. You usually deep down you struggle to believe you're a good person because for some reason people have always mistreated you, that kind of thing. And so ultimately, that's where the fear of success comes in. If you've ever been better than someone else and then been attacked by them because they were insecure, you most likely that fed the unlovable core exile essentially. And so for any clinicians or psychologists out there, please don't attack me for this. This is high level stuff, okay? But ultimately, the fear of success is if I'm better than others, I'm going to be hated.
Mm.
Okay, so for example, right? And this is, let's do this live. This is fascinating. I've done 370 other podcasts. I've done 1,800 of my own. I've been podcasting and speaking and coaching and training for 9 years now. You have handled me very well. A lot of times when I go on podcasts, I have to be a little bit concerned about being better than the host. It's so scary to share this, but I'm going to share it. I'm a stronger speaker than you are, and we both know that, and that doesn't bother you. But if you had the core wound of defective, it would bother you a lot. And you'd be insecure pretending not to be. And then you'd probably kind of do this with me a little bit. Right.
Mm. Yeah.
And so that's not happening. So I know that unlovable is most likely your core. And that's okay. That means we're safe together. Energetically, we're safe together. We're good. It's okay to say we're great. Like, it's cool. So I'm a strong speaker, and saying that makes defectives think I'm arrogant. When in reality, it's just true, and you're probably not that strong of a speaker. And that's why it pokes you. You'd rather hate me than just own the fact that you aren't as good as me at something.
Mm. Yeah.
Okay, so all this is landing. But the problem is that's the smaller percentage of the population. So if you look at the data, only 4% of people ever have written goals that and only a small percentage of them ever hit their goals. Okay, so from my understanding statistically, that tells me that 96% of the population doesn't really believe in themselves that much. If you have a ton of self-belief, why wouldn't you have written goals? Why wouldn't you have goals in general? This is like very scary to talk about because most people don't have goals. They don't have self-belief. And when they get around someone who does, it triggers their deepest insecurity. And then it's easier to say I'm arrogant than to look in the mirror and go, maybe I don't believe in myself as much as I think I do. And so what was my point of all that? That's where fear of success comes in. I have to be fearful that I'm a stronger speaker than you. Because if I come shine and outshine you, you might hate me.
Mm.
And you'll lash out. And it's not conscious. This is all just human energetic dominance crap that I can't stand, by the way. But it is real. And so ultimately, people who are really, 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 really good at stuff usually are very concerned about being hated.
Yeah. I one of those like I can be good at anything. So sometimes, yeah, that could affect me sometimes at work and everything else that I do. Um,
See how
go
vulnerable it is to share
play
that?
small, just to not seem so arrogant.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like, okay, I might, in a social networking event, I might share one of the things that I do. Because if I shared like all the five things, you'd be like, okay, you're kind of doing too much.
Yes, and then you'll get made fun of, right? That's what that is. And you'll be called a try hard.
Yeah, and then most people are not, you kind of, when you get that person that's insecure and their reception of that is like, oh, who do you think you are? It's those, reactions that kind of make you do this, or at least that's what makes me do this. So when I encounter the next person, I'm like, okay, let me not do too much so they're not like, feeling a resistance, I guess.
That's why you don't want to share all of your things
Right.
because you trigger other people's insecurities, and that's okay. I, you could tell me all the 5 things you're doing, and you and I could nerd out about it and love it, and I could tell you all the 50 things I'm doing, and it would be awesome, and we would celebrate each other. But that's not the world we live in. It's not, because unfortunately, we would appear very arrogant. We would appear, and we would be torn down. We would be torn down. Oh, you must be so nice to be so awesome, you guys. Like all the hate comments and all that. So
Mhm.
ultimately, you just kind of have to face the fear and just say, you know what? I am a strong speaker. I've been working on speaking every day for 9 years. I have a speaking score with the 25 impact points of effective communication that I rate from 0 to 10. I have been practicing effective communication my entire adult life, probably my entire life. And the truth is, I am a strong speaker, but that doesn't matter. I'm not allowed to say that. You can say that about me, and I can say that about you, but we can't say it about ourselves. And that's just the world we live in.
Yeah. Well, Alan, this has been such a very insightful conversation. I really appreciate your time. Before I close it out, is there anything you want to leave the listeners with? Anything that you're promoting?
Anything to leave the listeners with is personal responsibility. Some of your listeners' lives have been really, really, really hard. Some of them have been maybe on the easier side. Uh, your future, your life is your responsibility. At a young age, when my stepdad left and my father had passed away, and I kind of lost three families in a way by the time I was 14. And my birth father's side was very sweet, and they came back, and I've spent some time with them since. But like, I took personal responsibility somehow, and I went into my future, and it was not bright, and I decided to make it bright. And that requires a lot of self belief. That requires a lot of intelligence. And I realized that I was also born in a country that believes in investing in mines. So I got to go to school. I got financial aid and I got scholarships, and I'm very grateful because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. But ultimately, you are responsible for everything you say, think, do, feel, and believe. You're responsible for everything you don't say, don't think, don't feel, don't do, and don't believe. You're responsible for who you hang out with. You're responsible for what you do and don't do. You're responsible for what you say, think, do, feel, and believe in response to what's done to you. I know some people that have had horrible things done to them, and they turned it around and made something of it, and they live really meaningful, powerful, awesome lives. Uh, and I think personal responsibility is what I would leave everyone with, because ultimately, what else do you have control over, right? I mean, you don't get to choose your mom, you don't get to choose your dad, you don't get to choose your aunts and uncles, you don't get to choose where you were born, you don't get to choose most stuff, but you do get to choose what you say, think, do, feel, and believe. And you better be choosing that every single day. And when you do, your future will get brighter. I can't guarantee you're going to be a billionaire. I definitely can't, but it will be brighter. You can play your hand better. And to me, that's the most empowering thing in the world.
Yeah. It's so easy to play victim. I think accountability is really big right now.
Agreed.
Well, Alan, thank you so much for spending time on this podcast. For the listeners, I'll have Alan's information on the description. And as always, you can find us on any podcast platforms. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can email americangypsy@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Peace.